This programme is funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.
It was devastating at the time, is the only way I can really describe it, because I genuinely did love it, but I knew with complete certainty that I was never going to work for anybody again and that this was my time.
Hello, I'm Maria Staunton.
And I'm Mary Costello.
And this is Making It, the show that reveals the true stories of Mayo's women in business. From top executives, to artists, to female founders, to those providing essential services in our local towns.
Stay with us for the next 20 minutes. And who knows, you might hear the advice or inspiration you need to get your own dream off the ground.
Hello, and welcome to Making It. I'm Maria Staunton. My guest today is Asumpta Gallagher, whose business, Best Practice, is, well, why don't I let Asumpta actually tell you all about it herself?
Bestpractice.ie is a business that was set up in early 2018 to basically help GPs. I suppose I helped them find clarity with their systems and their processes and help them to become more streamlined in their practices, ultimately allowing them to run more profitable businesses and also to allow them more time to be the doctors that they want to be.
She does that through consultancy, staff training, HR and recruitment services and practice audits. But Asumpta told me that she thinks a real value to doctors lies in something a little less corporate sounding than that. A little bit more warm and fuzzy.
I think the biggest thing that I can offer to my clients is empathy. And that's something I probably didn't put a whole lot of value on at the very beginning of my business, because I suppose initially it was very much based around how do I help them to make more money, how do I help them to maximise on their income. But what I found that what I'm really helping them with is, helping them to think about why they do what they do and why do they do it the way they do it. And it's very much around allowing them more time to be doctors, recognising that there are certain parts of running a practice that they don't particularly enjoy. So therefore, how can they delegate that? So looking at the people that they have in their practice, effectively delegating, looking at what their strengths are and the things that they enjoy, looking at how they're doing things and is there a better way of doing things, because they're so busy that it's very rare that they take that time to step back. So I suppose the biggest thing that I have found is that when the GPs who work with me do take that time to take a step back from their practice, they gain such enormous value from that, because it might have been the first time ever they've done it, and it really gets them to reflect on what the whole thing is all about.
And what the whole thing is all about, of course, for most GPs, is caring for the patients. That's what they're in it for, not to be business owners.
And I suppose that I got an even really great insight into that about 2 years ago. I was invited to do a talk up at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and it was to a group of third year trainee GPs, and they invited me in to talk to that group about the business of general practice and the challenges that they may have to consider, even around being employers. And a lot of GPs really struggle with just that piece, being the boss, being the employer, and because of the nature and the type of work that they do, many of them find that very, very difficult. So a lot of the work in terms of HR that I do would be in helping them solve problems that have been pushed under the carpet for years and years, to do with staff issues that just haven't been dealt with. So that would be one of the areas where GPs often struggle quite a bit, is managing people.
As you can probably tell by now, Asumpta knows her business is providing something very valuable, and she also has the drive to go out and sell it. I wanted to know where that ambition came from.
I definitely come from an entrepreneurial family. All my brothers are in one business or another. My sisters weren't as such. There would have been a culture of the boys a lot in our house and what they were doing, and without exception, all of them have set up some sort of a business and have done very well. So it was always there. It was always in the atmosphere. I was the youngest of 13.
Wow.
So I would have always had to maybe shout a little bit louder to get heard in our house growing up. My mum was widowed when I was 8 years old. So in terms of where and now that she passed away there 3 years ago, coming up to 4 years now, which is kind of crazy actually. When I reflect back on her, because I was so young when my dad died, and how she managed all of us, and even listening back to stories of how she had managed things when she was younger and when all the kids were younger, I suppose, she was definitely an entrepreneur in her own way. In terms of, trying to run a family of our size, with limited resources. You had to have this, she definitely had something there that was very strong, in terms of being able to effectively delegate, keep everything going, and getting us all to a certain point in our lives, I suppose, as well, So I do think I probably got a lot of it from her.
Perhaps we all learned something from our parents' management styles. But Asumpta didn't stop there. She started in the world of general practice in the year 2000 and quickly became interested in patient-centred care and how it could be improved.
I felt that we needed a more kind of a joined-up approach, and surely there are better ways we could be doing things. I've always been curious, so I think that's probably where most of it came from, my curiosity. So when I began to learn about primary care and the services that were offered within it, I was always the kind of person that would think, is there an easier way or a better way we could do this, or that we could get things done?
Specifically, Asumpta found that it was really hard to access information and training. She felt there was only really the Irish College of GPs and the Irish Medical Organisation, and when there was any training, it was all in Dublin. And a very personal experience of the system brought those problems home.
The last few years of my mum being alive, and there was various illnesses and conditions, and I would have spent a lot of time with her in and out of hospitals, and I experienced that thing all over again of this lack of joined up thinking. So I suppose when I'm working with GPs, I very much come in with that approach of looking at what we're doing, and is there a better way we can do it? Is there an easier way we can do it? Why are we doing it? What motivates us to do it? And ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? And any doctor I speak to, they will always say, all I want to do is spend time with my patients. I love being with my patients.
In 2006, Asumpta began working as a manager at a busy practice in Galway City. And it was there that the first stirrings of entrepreneurship came, but not immediately.
So I was there only for 11 years, and about, I'd say, 10 years into that, I think it was in 2016, I decided to do a course on setting up my own business. I had no idea what that business was going to be, but I was going to do a course hoping something might spark in me. And then I met with a friend of mine during that time, and we were talking about my ideas for a business, and I said, really, look, I think it's going to be where my expertise is, which is in general practice. And I'm thinking about something around training maybe, because that was something I had a struggle accessing when as I'm working in it, because at that point I was still working in it. And so we came up with the name, the two of us together, Best Practice. So I registered the name, the CRO, again, not having started the business, but I registered the name back in September 2016.
Staying in her job, Asumpta began making moves. For example, she went and got a train the trainer qualification. But just as things seemed to be getting started, she was offered a job managing another clinic. It was an innovative kind of clinic, highly patient-centred in its approach, exactly the kind of place Asumpta was interested in. It brought a whole range of healthcare providers together, from physical to mental, all in one place. She completely parked her plans for Best Practice and took up the job, and she loved everything about it.
Unfortunately, 11 months later, it went into liquidation. And that was in February 2018. And it was devastating at the time, is the only way I can really describe it, because I genuinely did love it. But I knew with complete certainty when that happened, and after a couple of weeks when I had time to really think about my future, that I was never going to work for anybody again, and that this was my time to start Best Practice. So in my first year of business, really, I reflected back on that an awful lot, because there were so many learnings, you know, from mistakes that were made, and being able to recognise what those mistakes were. You know, this was also a start-up, you know, and I was there for 11 of the first 12 months of its life, and saw it to the very end, you know. In the beginning, what I did was I advertised a couple of courses, receptionist courses, that were going to be held in Galway in June, and set them up on Eventbrite, and I got 4 bookings for the course, the one of the courses that was going to be held in June. And to be honest, I approached it with no fear really either at the time. Great. I thought, well, what have I got to lose? This is being honest. But then I got 4 bookings and I had 2 cancellations. Okay. So it wasn't going so well really. So my confidence was probably, you know, I was probably a little bit too confident at the time and hadn't really thought it through. But the funny part about it, and this is absolute truth, is that an hour before I went in to provide that training to this lady, she was the receptionist, who'd only just started in the practice about 3 or 4 months before that. I was terrified. I felt, oh my God, I'm not going to know any of the questions, I'm not going to know any of the answers. I felt like a complete fraud. I was literally shaking in my boots. Yeah. And I went in anyway and provided the training, and sure, of course, I mean, I was 17 or 18 years doing it at this stage. Of course I knew the answers, and I came out of it buzzing, felt brilliant, you know. And so this was the first thing that I had got paid for in my business, and it was really exciting.
I myself heard about Asumpta Gallagher for the first time when our application form landed on my desk in the Innovation Hub at GMIT.
Empower Start was a big turning point for me when I applied for it back in 2018. It's hard to believe now, that's nearly 3 years ago. Yeah. But yeah, I think when I got accepted on Empower Start, that was the beginning of me realising actually maybe I do. I suppose that it was a sense of validation that maybe I did have a business that was worth pursuing.
Are you where you wanted to be? If you look on you know, where you are now and when you started out, are you happy with how things have progressed?
I suppose I'm not really one of those people that's brilliant at visualising. So when you ask the question, you know, how far have you come and are you surprised at how far you've come? I've really been kind of gently evolving over time, you know, where things just happen. And it's kind of hard to almost measure it, because I suppose in so many ways I've been quite spoilt in that most of my work has come through referral, and I haven't really had to, so I've been kind of kept sort of quite busy. I've never been really strategic in how that happened.
Yes, you don't have to do the hard sales as such, you know, as in go in and do the hard selling. It's coming to you.
Up to now I haven't, you know, whereas I think when it comes to considering how the business is going to grow, that's where I now need to become more strategic and have that plan in terms of where I am going forward. I think for me, my biggest reward would be to just increase my profile really. Like ultimately, I know I have so much that I can offer to my clients. I get so much motivation from helping them to, I suppose, getting them to understand why they do what they do. So my biggest aim is to become sort of recognised as that person who is an expert in what I do and that can make a difference for my clients.
Hello there, and thank you for checking out this event. So, taking place online.
My website is bestpractice.ie. that's where you'll find out more information about me. I'm also on LinkedIn under my own name, Asumpta Gallagher, so I'm happy for people to connect with me there as well. But everything is on my website.
We work with throughout the country. Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is a workflow that works for everybody, that keeps us safe, keeps our patients safe, keeps our staff safe. So this is what this program is all about.
I suppose one of the biggest things, one of the biggest challenges that GPs have, if we were to even take ourselves back to March 11th, 2020, I was delivering a practice management training course at a hotel in Sligo. And the following day I was due to work with a GP practice up in the northeast. And that evening, the following evening, I was due to deliver a talk to a group of GPs in a meeting that they have monthly. So as we know, on the 12th of March, everything was changing, and it was announced that evening, in fact, that all the schools were closing with immediate effect, in that they didn't open on the Friday. Businesses, everything was changing literally overnight. But one thing that didn't really change is that GPs were at the forefront from the very, very beginning. So they had to adapt their processes very, very quickly, in that they weren't sure, should we lock our doors? How are we going to manage this? Everything was happening so fast. So I suppose where I found that I could really help, particularly in the early stages, would have been with the clients that I was already working with, whereas I was able to go and talk to them about how things had now changed, reflecting what those changes on what those changes were, and seeing, well, now that we're not seeing patients face to face, how else can we see them? How do we keep our practices safe? How do we communicate the changes to patients? Making sure that we're also, looking after the patients that need to be seen, at the same time as trying to keep everybody safe, but also planning for this, I suppose, avalanche that was coming towards them, that nobody could really measure because there were so many unknowns.
One thing you haven't heard Asumpta talking about is the fact that she's a woman in business. And she told me that she tends not to dwell on those kind of questions of gender. But she did tell me a couple of stories that perhaps highlight differences between how men and women experience entrepreneurship.
I've had my business referred to as a project. I was asked how my project was going not that long ago, which was an interesting way to ask about it. So sometimes I think maybe we're not taken as seriously. If I'm in a network scenario and there are men in the room and I'm networking with men, I actually feel kind of relatively comfortable. But there are some situations where I remember being at a course once where there was a guy sitting next to me who had been in business, I'd say about 2 months, and I had been probably about a year and a half at that stage. And you would have thought by listening to him that he'd been in business for years, because he just had this completely different attitude to setting up, I do think we just overthink things a little bit. We're always second guessing. Well, I know I do anyway. And I think sometimes as women we struggle to own and what we do and be really confident in it, because the more confident in you are in what you do, the more people will believe you as well. If you don't really believe yourself, then other people are not going to believe you. And I think that's sometimes maybe a little bit of a difference between men and women.
You've been listening to Making It. A massive thank you to Asumpta Gallagher for coming on the show. As she mentioned, her website is bestpractice.ie. Hey, maybe tell your own GP about it. Myself and Mary would love to hear what you think of the show. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, all at Making It Mayo, or email makingitmayo@gmail.com. This show was recorded remotely for Claremorris Community Radio. For more great locally made programmes, visit ccr946.ie. I'm Maria Staunton, and thank you for listening.
This programme is funded by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland with the television licence fee.